Well, 2021 has drawn to a close, and as ever with the end of a year there is a demand, there is a clamour, there is a need for lists. And as ever, I, as your humble servant, will provide you with one such list as I go through my top 10 games of 2021. A quick note before we start, however. This list will encompass games that I have played newly in 2021. What that means is that Ocarina of Time, which I played 1,000 times and replayed this year as well, is off the table, but Hollow Knight, which I only played in 2021, despite the fact that it is a 2017 release, is on the table. This should make for a list that's a little bit different from what you've seen from everyone else, and means that you might find a few games that you've missed, not just this year, but in prior years as well. So without further ado, let's get listing. Number 10. Pokémon Unite. Himi Studio Group, 2021. Pokémon Unite is a bizarre game in many ways. I would never have expected it to exist. It blends MOBA gameplay, which is designed to infuriate a player as much as possible, with a game about cute animals being battled against each other by children. Yet for all that it is a MOBA, Pokémon Unite doesn't infuriate me in the way that a game of Dota or a game of League might. I think the genius of this game, and the reason I enjoy it so much, is because of the time limit. Pokémon Unite, unlike all other MOBAs, has a set 10-minute time limit on every single game that you play. It means that even if you have an incredibly frustrating game, with terrible teammates, where you're playing badly, where your opponents are just styling on you, it's only going to last for another 5 minutes. It's never going to get to the point where you are so frustrated that you want to put the game down forever. And that I think is so valuable in a gameplay type that is often so toxic and so bad to play most of the time. I regret the thousands of hours I put into Dota purely because they didn't make me happy, and yet I can sit down for a game of Unite and I can enjoy myself. That being said, there are problems with the game. Balance has been a huge issue, but it almost always is in all MOBAs, as well as the problem of Teamy really trying to nickel and dime you for every penny you're worth, with costumes costing upwards of £30 to £40. That being said, as a free-to-play game, the price is right, and even though money does confer an in-game advantage, it's not so bad as to remove all skill from the game. As such, if you haven't tried it out, I would thoroughly recommend giving Unite a look. It's definitely worth at least 10 minutes of your time. Number 9. Bug Fables, Moonsprout Games, 2019. I came to Bug Fables after playing Paper Mario Origami King. As it turned out, that game was not for me, and I was still hankering for an authentic Paper Mario style experience. Fortune favoured me then, as I was recommended this game early in 2021. Bug Fables is a game that oozes love for the genre it comes from. It has a scrappy cast of characters that I really enjoyed playing with, and a surprisingly deep combat system given the low numbers involved. I particularly enjoyed using the badge system that they provided, not badge, medal system that they provided, to create really overpowered and interesting builds for my characters, and it felt really fulfilling to see those come into effect later in the game. Bug Fables is, for lack of a better word, an incredibly competent RPG. There isn't a single aspect of the game that I would say is bad to any degree. Everything is well done, everything is well thought out. That being said, it feels like it lacks a je ne sais quoi. Whilst everything is competently done, it is very dedicated to the original style of Paper Mario and Thousand Year Door, and often doesn't think to improve on those formulae in a meaningful way. The story is interesting and the characters are likable, yet there was no point where I was surprised by the story in a meaningful way, and no point where I really fell in love with any of the individual characters. As such, it doesn't get higher up on this list, and yet I would recommend almost everyone to give it a go, because it is a beautiful tribute to the Paper Mario games, and that alone deserves a lot of credit. Number 8. BanjoKazooie, The Jiggies of Time. Mark Kirko, 2020. I seem to be having a lot of fun this year with games that are tributes to games that I loved in the past. BanjoKazooie, The Jiggies of Time is a wonder. It combines my favourite game of all time with my favourite platformer of all time into a game that captures not only the spirit of BanjoKazooie platforming, but also the tone of those games. Mark Kirko has outdone himself here. It feels like Rare made this game. It feels like a game that could have been released in 1998 alongside the original BanjoKazooie, and nobody would have batted an eyelash. The platforming is more often than not tight but rewarding. The combat and the bosses are exactly the same as they were in BanjoKazooie, so nothing to write home about. But mainly, the environments have been so lovingly made and so intricately designed that there's always something interesting around the corner. It suffers a little from typical fan mod problems. Kirko assumes a degree of competency that I don't think is universal across the Banjo community. And later in the game, certain jiggies require you to know certain bugs about physics in BanjoKazooie to be able to get them. That being said, I'm not going to hold a couple of jiggies against a game that is so overwhelmingly charming and so overwhelmingly fun to play most of the time. So if you've had a hankering for that old school collectathon platforming, this is definitely the game for you. Number 7. Deathloop. Arcane Studios, 2021. Deathloop is a prime example of what AAA game development can do when it's firing on all cylinders. The world that Arcane has lovingly crafted is accompanied by one of the best soundtracks I think I've ever heard in gaming, alongside two protagonists that I love every moment of. If there was an award for natural dialogue in a game, it would be won by Deathloop, hands down. Jason Kelly as Colt and Ozioma Akaga as Juliana managed to convey a sense of familiarity between the characters, even when they don't know each other, meaning that you can feel the relationship that they have, even though Colt is unaware of that relationship from the start. Add on to this the typical Arcane gameplay you've come to know and love, allowing you to approach the game from any angle, be it through the streets or on the roofs, and with any method, be it stealth, be it frontal assault, be it persuasion. And just as you might start getting tired of the core loop mechanic, the game knows exactly when to end. It is perfectly paced. But ultimately, the ending is where the game suffers. It can't provide a satisfying conclusion to the narrative that it set up. It's difficult to say that the ending is anything less than disappointing. You want more, not because the narrative demands it, but because you've not been given enough of an explanation to truly understand what's been happening with these characters and in this game. And ultimately, I feel that Deathloop's conclusions about what it wants and what it means are confused. And yet that doesn't take away from the incredible gameplay, that doesn't take away from the snappy dialogue, that doesn't take away from the amazing world that's been created. So if you're going to play a AAA game this year, I would thoroughly recommend that you give Deathloop a look. Number 6. Monster Hunter Rise, Capcom, 2021. The Monster Hunter franchise and I don't have a great relationship. I've tried it before, and I tried it recently with Monster Hunter World, but I just couldn't get into the games. It's very strange. I'm usually one who enjoys fighting big bosses, and this is just a game about doing that. Yet, I couldn't get into it largely because the movement systems in the game felt sluggish, and as such, I just felt like I was moving underwater most of the time. My choice of melee weapons as well seemed to not really gel with me, but I decided to give the series one more go. I didn't feel like I'd given it a fair shake, and I'm glad I did, because Monster Hunter Rise fixes everything that I've had trouble with in Monster Hunter. Through black magic of some sort, Capcom have got a game that runs buttery smooth on the Switch, and they do so whilst also implementing the Wirebug system. Wirebugs in Rise make you feel like you're playing a Spider-Man game. You can fly around anywhere you want in a few seconds, and the movement feels so incredible. Additionally, in this game, I made the transition to light bowgun, which, as it turns out, is my ancestral weapon. I found myself addicted to the satisfying tack every single time one of my rounds would hit an enemy. And whilst I can't say that I like the grindier parts of the game, I came to appreciate them more because I was enjoying what I was doing so much more than I did before. There are few flaws with this game. Potentially there could be less of a grind to get to the later stages of the DLC, and potentially it could be easier to get to optimal loadouts. But Rise has made a believer out of me, and if it can change my mind, it can change anyone's. Number 5. No More Heroes 3, Grasshopper Manufacture, 2021. Here's a game I never really believed would happen. No More Heroes is one of my favourite games of all time. Suda51 with his original entry captured my imagination and my feelings in a way that almost nobody ever has since, with the game so anarchic and fun that even as I struggled to keep up with the plot, I fell in love. I won't be the first person to say that No More Heroes 2 was a bit of a disappointment coming from the first. That being said, I liked it well enough, and I was happy for the series to end there. Cue my surprise when, a few years ago, we heard whisperings of a No More Heroes 3. And I'm glad to say that its release in 2021 gave me everything I wanted, and a bunch of stuff I didn't know I wanted until I saw it. Unapologetic in the way it presents itself, No More Heroes 3 will sit you down and run you through some of the most fun beat-em-up combat you'll ever see, and then it will sit you through 15 minutes of characters talking about a movie director you've never even heard of. It's a game that'll happily transition from its normal beat-em-up self to a turn-based strategy to a lawn mowing simulator, because it has such belief in what it wants to show you. And it's far from flawless. No More Heroes 3 has an overworld that chugs almost all the time, and at certain points can become almost completely unplayable. The combat is brilliant most of the time until a boss will just one-shot you with an ability that you had no idea existed. And yet, despite all of that, it's still so much fun. It's still amazing to see Suda51 get to go all out and throw every crazy idea he once had while sitting on the toilet at you, whilst you sit on the toilet to save. Ultimately, No More Heroes 3 isn't a game I would recommend to everyone, but it is one of my favourite games of the year, and I had so much fun playing it. Number 4. Hollow Knight, Team Cherry, 2017. For those who follow my Let's Plays, it's probably unsurprising that Hollow Knight ended up on this list. But Hollow Knight, at least for me, is one of the biggest surprises I think I've ever encountered. As a rule, I don't like games where I feel lost. I don't like games where I feel alone. And yet, Hollow Knight is a game that I thoroughly enjoyed. But as I've thought more on the game, I've begun to realize the reason I enjoyed the game as much as I did is because I played it through the Let's Play medium. This makes Hollow Knight a uniquely difficult game for me to analyze. There are significant issues for me within the game that simply did not come up because I was speaking to Yorkshire Tea, so I wouldn't feel alone. I was able to ask for directions if I ever got lost, and I had a lot of people following me week to week, commenting and helping me out as things went. So I struggle, because how authentic was my experience with Hollow Knight? How objective is this review and this understanding that I have of the game now? Because I recognize within Hollow Knight elements of games that I really don't like. I don't like losing currency on death. I don't like having to run back to a corpse after dying to a boss. And yet these are problems I never encountered to a meaningful degree, because as it turns out, I'm somewhat talented at Hollow Knight. And so here is the struggle. How does one rate a game that they enjoyed, but they also know in other circumstances they wouldn't enjoy, and that they also know they wouldn't enjoy if they were slightly less good at the game? And it's a question that I still don't have a sufficient answer to. What I can tell you is this. I looked forward to playing Hollow Knight every single week. There are precious few games that felt so incredible to control, and where movement felt so fluid. I had a great time pushing myself through that game. I looked forward to fighting the next boss, because it represented a real challenge for myself, and when I finally defeated Absolute Radiance, I cannot describe a moment where I have felt better in the past year. The truth is, I may never come to a satisfying conclusion, so what I'll say is that Hollow Knight is a brilliant game, and if you love Metroidvanias, you will love it, and you've almost certainly already played it. But even if you don't, it has a chance, a real chance of winning you over. Number 3. Guilty Gear Strive. Arc System Works, 2021. I love fighting games. If you've ever watched any of the videos on this channel, you'll know that I bring them up a lot in the way that I perceive and understand games. I'm by no means amazing at them. I'm at best okay, but I still love playing them. I love learning combos, I love adapting to matchups, and I love feeling myself get better with every single game. But I've always been someone who's more interested in the Street Fighter side of fighting games, rather than the anime Air Dasher style of fighting games. Which is why I was so excited and surprised by the changes that Arc System Works made to Guilty Gear Strive. It's a fighting game that understands that accessibility doesn't necessarily mean new players should be able to beat the pros. It understands at a fundamental level that the fun in fighting games comes from knowing that even if you lost, you can do something. There's something that you can improve on. There's a move that you can understand now that you might not have been able to understand before. Guilty Gear Strive is excellent, not just at indicating exactly what a player needs to do to get better, but providing an environment where a player can find people that challenge them to the greatest of their ability, through possibly the best online matchmaking system that I've found for a game. Couple that with rollback netcode, which is best in class, and you have a game that is a dream to take online and play with your friends. And I think that's why I rate this game so highly. So many of my friends got into it, and I was able to play so many great sets against people that otherwise wouldn't really get into this kind of game. And all the while, I could feel myself getting better, playing better, and knowing more about the game. There are some problems. The lobby system isn't the best in the world, and there might have been some issues around character balance early. But these are minor in the face of a fighting game that I think manages to create accessibility without removing depth. Guilty Gear Strive is what modern fighting games should indeed strive to be. And for that, I think we'll see it being played for a long time to come. Number 2. Garic Phone. On Ryzen Social Games, 2020. This is probably the most bizarre addition to this list, and probably the most confusing coming in at number 2. Garic Phone is possibly the funniest video game I've ever played in my life. Of course, it's stretching what the definition of a video game even is at this point, being a browser game that you play with your friends that's based on a 2007 telephone game variant. And yet, its simplicity lends its strength. The reality is that I have a group of friends that I've been playing video games with for nearly 10 years. The number of jokes that we have in between us is unbelievable. And the result is a game where I've cried laughing more times than I can count. The unbelievable thing about Garic Phone is that even with friends that I don't know that well, it still somehow ends up with us all dying of laughter. And with the past 2 years having been as serious as they have been, I think the degree of levity that Garic Phone has lent to my life has been something that's really, really valuable to me. So if you haven't tried it out, you really should. And frankly, if your parents haven't tried it out, they probably should. And your siblings. And your cousins. And probably your dog as well. Number 1. Final Fantasy XIV Online, Endwalker. Square Enix Creative Business Unit 3, 2021. What can be said about Endwalker that hasn't been said elsewhere by someone far more eloquent than myself? Endwalker stands as a monument, a testament to the value of MMORPGs as a storytelling medium. The culmination in a story continuously told over 8 years. No other genre of game could do this. No other genre of game could tell a story for such a long period of time and allow players to get as invested as they have been in the lives of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn and in the world of Eorzea. Endwalker is probably the most significant MMORPG release since Wrath of the Lich King, and that possibly underplays it, as I would argue it is the most significant MMORPG release since World of Warcraft's original release more than 15 years ago. But I can talk about the significance of the game and heap praise on it for days, but the reality is I wouldn't be telling people anything new. Instead, I'll try to explain how Endwalker made me feel. I've been scared these past few years. I have played a lot of video games, but there have been precious few that I've loved. Over the past few years, I've begun to wonder whether gaming is even for me anymore. Friends would heap praise on games like Hades, on the Outer Wilds, on Dark Souls, and with every game they praised, I found a game that was wanting, that didn't excite me, and that didn't make me feel anything. Even games I enjoyed, like Hollow Knight and Disco Elysium, are games that I merely thought were good, potentially great, rather than what people described them as potentially the best games they'd ever played. I began to feel like there was something broken about me, and I began to worry that I'd never love a video game again. And that scared me. That scared me so much because I have spent so much of my life dedicated to this medium, and so much of my time has gone into trying to explain my love and explore my love of this medium with all of you. So, when I cried tears at the end of Endwalker, they weren't just tears because of the emotion of the moment. They were tears of relief, because I had finally found a game that I really loved with all of my heart once again. Final Fantasy XIV is not a game for everyone, but at the end of 2021, it was the exact game for me. Thank you all very, very much for listening. I'd ask you to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Please debate whether you think my choice is legitimate. Please give me your lists as well. I'd be incredibly interested to talk about them. But with that, thank you all very, very much for supporting T and I through this past year, and we hope that you have a wonderful 2022.